The government was aggressively gathering information on everybody and then using that information to embarrass people, blackmail people, threaten people, withhold things from people that they knew that they wanted. Right. How might this play out in the United States?
Some forms of mass surveillance, which would come out of that combination of data being in the hands of those entities. It could be useful for exploitation. There's very little transparency about where it's going. And you know, if you watch Musk closely, it's clear that he's not just about the United States. Who knows whether other foreign entities are getting access or paying for access to the same data? So I think it is very dangerous.
The recent article that you published, it was titled DOGE Reality Check. It was always about the data. Was just downright shocking, in part because of the detail that you went into. And I'm wondering if you could just run through this with us. I wanted to share it with our listeners, but I wanted it to come right from the horse's mouth.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I tried to do two things. One was, and I think people figured this out, but early on, I had a data science and security person reach out to me within a few days of DOGE and saying, people are missing this. This is all about access to massive reams of data the federal government houses. And I wrote about him, just quoting him, and everything he said pretty much happened over the coming months. And so, you know, as Musk, quote unquote, leaves, the worry is that you know, it's not that if you thought this was always about efficiency, then it seemed like a failure. But if the goal really was access to mass amounts of data, he sort of, in theory, is leaving, mission accomplished. And so I tried to walk through all the different places, and these all would come up at the time. But, you know, everything from Treasury data, Social Security data, IRS data, Homeland Security data, student loan information, on and on and on. They really did have access to that. There were multiple moments where there were clearly security breaches, irregularities, all of a sudden going way beyond read-only. So we don't know where this data went. It certainly didn't. They were putting things on their website that weren't secure. They released information from classified parts of the government that they shouldn't have. So I do think it was, you know, we're not going to know right now, but I do think this was 100 plus days of really scary access to the most sensitive data. And then you add in this Palantir aspect where they're now giving millions and millions in contracts to that company to also go through data. And it really has been, as this friend of mine said, and I tried to write, a true digital coup. So yeah, so this whole narrative, oh, he left and what a failure. It was never about savings, clearly. This was about something, unfortunately, far deeper and long-term, I worry, more meaningful in a negative way than the way it's been largely covered in recent months.
I think the problem with describing this and discussing it is the level of abstraction here, David. I remember watching the movie The Lives of Others. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It was about life in East Germany. In fact, it's dubbed. It's in German, but it's probably one of the most profound and shocking movies I've ever watched my whole entire life. And it's about life in East Germany when 1/3 of the entire country was spying on the other 2/3, and how the government, at that time it was Vladimir Putin's government, was aggressively gathering information on everybody and then using that information to embarrass people, blackmail people, threaten people, withhold things from people that they knew that they wanted. Right. How might this play out in the United States if Palantir, Peter Thiel's company, or if Musk, spirited that information back to X and to Grok, his AI program? I mean, is this the sort of thing where the average American might discover that suddenly their personal tax information is being used against them, or the data on which drugs their doctor prescribes to them becomes public? I mean, why should we care?
I mean, again, not to scare everyone, but yeah, if you think these folks are acting in good faith, then you shouldn't worry about those things. But to the extent we know they're not, they, in theory, have gained access to all the things that we, involuntarily for the most part, because there's certain information we provide when we pay taxes and take out student loans, and if you get other benefits from the government. This is all information we basically are obligated to give. And now it's in the hands of Musk and his people, and apparently, if not already, soon enough, Peter Thiel and Palantir, and that could be used, as some have already said, for some forms of mass surveillance, which would come out of that combination of data being in the hands of those entities. It could be useful for exploitation. There's very little transparency about where it's going. And if you watch Musk closely, it's clear that he's not just about the United States. Who knows whether other foreign entities are getting access or paying for access to the same data. So I think it is very dangerous. And I don't think we really even know where it will all go. But I think you're right about it being thought of vaguely and not specifically. But when you look at what past authoritarian governments did without even the technology we have today, it was very intrusive, and I do worry it could get worse. I was at a conference on Monday, and someone described it as all of this is a profound innovation of the autocratic playbook, where you used to have this sort of oligarch-autocrat model, and the oligarch was outside of government and the autocrat was inside. And here you've almost created this parallel system, but where the oligarch is sort of sitting atop this sort of data civil service with all that information. So it really is sort of a new phase of some of those older models that you described from that movie.
Yeah, I totally get it. And I can see where it would be useful information, very profitable information for Musk or Jeff Bezos or whatever. I mean, to know, for example, they have access to all our DMV information. So right. They know if they wanted to market to everybody who owns a Toyota in the United States, they could do very targeted marketing. If they wanted to market to every man who's ever taken an ED drug, or every woman who's ever used hormone replacement therapy for menopause, or any teenager who's ever been treated for acne. I mean, they can super micro target us now, right, to sell us crap. I totally get that, and that has been the basis of Google's business model forever. You start Googling acne medication, and suddenly you're going to get ads all over the internet for acne medication. So but that. I mean, we've kind of gotten used to that, and that seems relatively benign compared to how data could be used by a repressive government. How do we make those examples, and what examples can you imagine of ways that this data could be used that actually can destroy people's lives or cause them to not engage in behavior that might confront government?
Yeah, I mean, the one area that, because again, when you mention the specific department, sometimes that gets lost. But once you start telling someone who took out a student loan, all that payment information, the amount you owe, the information you had to provide in order to either pay or not pay or defer payment, that's all available. So that's very private, personal sort of financial information that all of a sudden could be in the hands way beyond the part of the Department of Education that you were dealing with. I mean, you start getting into those specifics, and I think it becomes sort of not hard to imagine where that might go. And as you said, there's a massive value to this. I mean, there's a reason why Elon Musk was literally willing to give up $1 million. Remember these little lotteries he had, both at the end of the presidential in Wisconsin. He would pay $1 million because he wanted people to sign up for these petitions he was putting out there, because that data really mattered and it helped him think through election stuff. When candidates try and take a simple email list or telephone list and communicate it with it for a campaign, those lists are now invaluable in politics, and people have to report the value of those if, let's say, they swap them or something. So as you said, this is very rich data. It could make some people a lot of money, as we're seeing, but could also be used, I think, by a ill-intentioned government or companies that are part of this sort of whole bizarro billionaire world we're stuck with now that's tied to the hip with Trump. You never know how private entities might also use it in the wrong way. So it really is, and the bottom line is for 100+ days, we've seen them basically ransacking through all of these data sets and all these different departments. And I don't have any faith that they didn't grab a whole lot of this data. The courts would stop them to some degree, but it largely, I think, either was too late or ended up happening. And it's out there now. And
it seems that knowing somebody's financial history and knowing their medical history and knowing their legal history, right down to, the police got called for domestic disturbance or something. While it may not be so much of a threat to the average person, it seems like for many politicians, this could be the stuff of political blackmail. Why are politicians more freaked out about this?
It's interesting. I do think there is potential longer term that this becomes politically damaging for the right. I mean, this is if someone's a sincere and authentic, truly a libertarian, this entire conversation should be sending them through the stratosphere. Yeah. And my hope would be that you start to see some on the right understand that, again, a mega database of all Americans is something that probably scares most Americans if they understand that's what's being done. Right. And my hope is it does create some longer term coalition of people and maybe some responsible bipartisan members of Congress to say that this is just far, far too much in Trump for their own self-interest. I mean, I don't. Yeah. It certainly, we know how Putin operates. It's all about compromise.
Right.
It's not hard to imagine that being a more and more dominant part of U.S. politics down to individual politicians. So if it worries them directly, but also the broader sort of libertarian strand, and I don't mean there's a negative in a positive way, that Americans don't believe government, in America at least, should have this kind of information, let alone use it for the wrong reasons. Yeah. My hope is there is some groups speaking out against it.
I get it. David Pepper. Check it out. Pepperspectives. DavidPepper.substack.com. Sign up for it. David, thanks so much.